Welcome to the final Q&A of 2023. Post your questions down below and I'll answer them in the new year, either through shorts, dedicated longs, or classic Q&As just like this. Either way, good questions will always be recognized. So don't be shy in the comments section, because after all, I'm just here to help you out. Let's get cracking. First question. Would you consider skipping front delts entirely so that the biceps can catch up and peek over the delts? From a bodybuilding illusion standpoint, that makes sense. We see this in guys like Natural Hypertrophy, Joe Kellett, and Greg Plitt. Here, the biceps are prioritized, sometimes even more than the triceps, to create a top-heavy arm effect. And the shoulders are jacked yet not overpowering. This makes the chest and biceps appear larger by comparison, which is essentially the opposite of the look of today's enhanced bodybuilders. Nowadays, it's all about bolder shoulders and simply having huge arms, period. But back then, there was an art to balancing out the ratios between the biceps, triceps, and delts, which is noticeable at very low body fats, with the contour of the muscles and ridge where the biceps and front delts meet. Also, if you don't have the best biceps peak genetics, which Greg Plitt actually did not have, the flex won't look as good. So his arms were similar to mine, yet they appeared insane, because he downsized his delts for fitness modeling. Which, funny enough, those standards have also changed. Men's physique now resembles classic bodybuilders in terms of width, and classic isn't really classic anymore with these massive tree trunks, delts, and shreddedness, but I digress. Looking at my front delts, for example, they're overpowering and make my biceps look worse than they actually are from the front and rear. And the only way to counter this is to raise the arms higher, but even then, posing can only do so much if your delts are just that big. So returning to your question, theoretically, shrinking the delts to accentuate the bicep peak is logical. But in practice, you have to consider how will you achieve that. Because your front delts are engaged in most presses regardless of angles. So you would need to find a way to de-emphasize the delts as much as possible and probably get weaker overall in pressing, which could negatively impact your chest and triceps gains. So you might have to increase isolation work for those two muscles or find more specific exercises like the reverse grip bench press. So my best advice is to eliminate all vertical presses and any delt isolation work that doesn't target the rear, as the rear delt can enhance the back double biceps pose, making the biceps seemingly appear higher up on the arm. I'd also suggest using low incline benching, say 15 degrees for upper chest workouts, even if it's not as effective, to minimize front delt involvement. You might also want to reduce pressing volume but increase isolation work, or simply maintain your current mass to avoid worsening the imbalance, but not necessarily try to downsize in case it hurts the rest of your physique. All this to say, I like the concept you brought up, but I feel like this aesthetic refinement needed to happen early on in your lifting journey. And there's also the issue of genetics, because even with specialization, your front delts may respond well and your biceps might not. So the illusion plan could still fail. So I'm at a loss for recommendations other than to get smaller and weaker at presses, be very careful with the angles, and reduce isolation work for the shoulders. The front delts always get hit, so it's a tricky problem to have. Is it okay and safe to only do neck flexion and skip extension? Actually, yes, but only if you're doing a ton of axial loaded movements. If you're training like an aesthetic gym bro who exclusively uses leg machines, you'll need to isolate the back of your neck. However, if you're doing serious barbell squatting, high bar good mornings, SSB work, and even trap bias hip hinges, then the back of your neck should get decently thick, especially if you're in a caloric surplus and become super strong. And I believe this is what some critics of neck training meant when they said, well, I never isolated my neck and it seems big enough. They're always referring to the back side of the neck, and even the traps which tie into them, thus maximizing the illusion. Which makes sense because you're kind of doing a isometric neck extension with heavy weights, similar to how your core can get developed from isometric calisthenics or strongman type training even without doing crunches. That said, 9 out of 10 times these criticizers do not have a thick sternocleidomastoid, aka the front part of the neck, because growing this muscle requires flexion strength, not extension. And everyone that I've spoken to who's done neck curls usually gain at least another inch or two, even as advanced lifters. And in my case, whenever I stop doing neck curls, there is a 1-to-1 perfect correlation, as in, my neck always shrinks. I tested this for many years, but last year is particularly noticeable, where I got my squat up to 500 pounds with a 600 pound deadlift. Guess what? My neck was 17 inches, smaller than it was in 2016 and 2017, despite having my strongest legs yet. And I kept doing those big exercises during my cut, even the ones that are more biased towards the neck. And of course, as expected, as I fucking knew would happen, it shrank down again. So my 3 worst areas for bodybuilding were calves, neck, and lower hamstrings, which are the 3 muscles that lack proper isolation. Now you tell me if that's a coincidence. Or will you listen to some genetically gifted Reuter who says, yeah bro, stop strapping to your head and doing resistance training. Just do squats and deadlifts to get yoked. Don't fall for the minimalist trap. They only got results because of heavy drug abuse and hitting absurd numbers that you or I will never hit. And like I said, I've done the trial and errors for you. You can trust that not doing neck curls is 100% sabotaging your potential. And at the end of the day, wrestlers and combat athletes still have bigger necks than bodybuilders and powerlifters. So everyone should take notes. The high-level anecdotes are too many. And we even have research confirming that your sternocleidomastoid mastoid will not grow optimally without direct work. Who would have thought? Like, imagine the opposite logic. Imagine me telling you that neck curls will improve your dumbbell shrug. Does that make any sense? No. But if I said power shrugs and high bar good mornings can help your neck extension, then it's not really shocking, is it? I have sternum discomfort when doing weighted dips. Is it possible for my sternum to adapt if I do bodyweight for a while? I've often said that 1 in 4 lifters do not have the structural build to tolerate dips. But the more I reflect on the average complainer, the more I realize how they've skipped so many steps. Heck, even natural hypertrophy used to have sternum pain, but now it's all gone. And about the unlucky 25%, is there any data to confirm that claim? It's all anecdotal, right? So I think we all just pulled this number out of our ass because it seemed plausible enough, but at the end of the day, it's not sending the correct message and can turn off many lifters who actually could handle weighted dips. So what I think now? Well, I acknowledge that a small minority of lifters cannot do dips no matter what due to structural issues that are too difficult to explain, but usually boils down to ribcage. Although I don't think it's common at all. Probably less than the aforementioned 25%. And I truly believe that with proper strength training, you can build the necessary tissue capacity to handle dips. So I'm going to make a weighted dip solution 2.0 video very soon. But first, I want to mention that when I got started with calisthenics, our community all handled high volume dips without pain. When we transitioned into weighted dips, which didn't happen until years later, we had already done thousands of reps in the deepest joint angles. And I think this conditioned the sternum, because most of us were doing 30 to 50 dips in one shot. And if you would have said this was the standard 10 years ago, no one would have thought anything about it. But these days, you'll get the opposite reaction. I know, because one of my shorts on dips, which went viral on TikTok and YouTube, getting around 1 million views in total, had a bunch of beginners saying, well, I can do 10 reps on bodyweight dips. Why should I not go weighted and do, say, 6 to 8 reps and progress from there? And then these same guys wonder why their sternum hurts shortly after. Are you fucking kidding me? If you can't do 15 bodyweight dips, you have no business going weighted. And my personal standard, which is completely reasonable, is at least 30 reps. Because why would you want to overload an exercise like a dip that has a higher injury risk and probability of sternum pain? See, ego is the problem. No one wants to be humbled, acknowledging that they're not at the appropriate level yet to go weighted. And mind you, 30 dips is not impressive. Sorry, I'm not going to lie to you. I was doing 50 before ever touching weights. And now I can do 73 straight dips in the 180s. And you saw me do a 30 down dip workout, which is 465 reps. And guys want to school me on dip standards? Buddy, stop making excuses for being weak. Get really good at bodyweight dips, and once it becomes inefficient, then go weighted. But even 15 to 20 reps is efficient as fuck if you ask me. And calisthenics athletes are laughing at the normies who find this to be unrealistic. Bull. So, I do believe the sternum can adapt if you do high volume dips for a long time. But you really got to build that base in this extended range of motion. And mixing in pullovers on the side also helps to strengthen the thorax. Are one-arm pull-ups worth it? I can incorporate them into my workout and replace weighted pull-ups or some other sort of lat exercise. Will they build significant muscle, or are they just a party trick? Yes and no. It's worth it in the sense that pursuing the one-arm pull-up will force you to develop huge lats and biceps. Just achieving one is equal to a 1 rep max pull-up and can completely replace all strength work. In this way, it's a secret to avoid doing low rep weighted pull-ups. However, most lifters will fail to unlock it in the first place. And even if they did, adding plus ones beyond that point is depressingly difficult. It can take an entire year to do that. So the progression potential is awful. However, the motion itself is a vertical unilateral pull, which is amazing for calisthenics. But you can technically get those same benefits with archer ring chin-ups. So you don't need elite strength in order to reap the same hypertrophy benefits for the biceps and lats. Not to mention the skill component, longer arms, and body weight further affecting leverages. So archer ring chins allow us to achieve the same muscle building benefits in a unilateral way while being in a hypertrophy rep range. And it's easy double progression from there on. So you have one arm straight with a cupped wrist extended out to the side with minor bending assistance. It's pure brute force that's more stable since the torso is no longer rotating. You can even argue it's more aligned for lats since it's a pull-in motion, thus getting a better stretch and squeeze as you move laterally with the rings. These also have high carryover to one-arm chins if you eventually want to go down that route, or will improve upon your current PRs. So it's by far the best calisthenics pull to correct uneven lats. And if you can manage sets of 4 to 10, you'll be wide and won't need to do regular one-arm pull-ups ever again. Do you think a 315 OHP is achievable naturally without severe blow maxing? I'll be honest, bro, I've never seen a lean or lightweight natural lifter who can overhead press 3 plates. All of them were bear mode. Not necessarily obese, but usually between 15 and 30% body fat. And it's also important to clarify whether it's a seated or standing press, because standing requires more skill, coordination, and bracing. So in my case, you saw me do 245 times 2 seated, which in 1 rep max terms is a bit under 275. Now, had I not stopped bulking, I definitely could have achieved it. And this as someone with hypermobile elbows and being max 20% body fat in the 180s. Imagine what taller, non-curse lifters could do. Like, what if I were to bulk up to 200 pounds or even 225? I'm convinced that it would be possible to overhead press 315, and my bench would likely hit a minimum of 4.5 plates, aka 200 kilos. Therefore, I must say that it's not unrealistic if you're willing to gain a ton of weight. But you'll likely have to be heavier than you ever thought possible, possibly by another 20 to 50 pounds. So I don't believe for a second that I can overhead press 3 plates while being under 180, but maxed out bear mode, even losing my abs, which I've yet to do, I don't see why not. And this is actually a thing with natural strongmen and OG natties like John Fung, Freaky D, and recently Andrew Richards. Though he went full-on Kiriakos mode, but just to say, if he can do 500 pounds while weighing over 400, what can someone do while weighing in the 250s? Just a little something to consider. It's back. Get a free stealth hoodie with any order over $99. Normally at $88 value, these premium hoodies are built to handle your toughest workouts. With a sculpted athletic fit, moisture wicking and odor resistant fabric, it's one of my favorite pieces of clothing to throw on for those early morning training sessions, and especially now in the winter time. So Barbell Apparel has sold out these hoodies every year, so be sure to grab yours before they're gone. Join Barbell's community of athletes who make no excuses and settle for nothing less than the best. Backed by a 365-day, no questions asked guarantee, Barbell's training gear and casual wear is built to power whatever your workouts, work days, and adventures demand. Link in the description box. Would you consider the volume on rows and pull-ups to be the same weekly sets for the back, or do you separate the two because each movement targets different areas in the back musculature? I count it as the same for the back because there's a lot of overlap in various muscles that get targeted in both rows and pull-ups. For example, if you do a dead hang on pull-ups, you're recruiting more traps and rear delts. Likewise, if you row with tucked elbows towards the belly button, that's a lot of lats. So it's not just about the movement pattern. You must analyze the muscle biasing. In both exercises, you can't eliminate the involvement of the lats or the upper back. So why attempt to define the volume differently? To me, that's overthinking. It's not like the legs where we can separate the quads from the posterior chain. For example, If you have a squat-focused leg day versus a hip hinge-focused day, there's a clear distinction in recovery and movement patterns. It's night and day. But if we're comparing Yates rows versus chin-ups, you'd be surprised how much they reinforce one another. And if you're training your back twice a week with a variety of horizontal and vertical pulls, does this really matter? Like, I do 3 compound movements twice a week, each different. I never assess whether it's more lats or upper back, because either way, the volume threshold for both areas is reached. And if I'm getting stronger, my entire back is going to get thick and wide. So we're not talking about the assistance muscles here. It's literally the primary movers of the back. Therefore, it's not a major concern unless you really have a bad imbalance. What strength standards can you give for free weighted ATG belt squats? My work gym doesn't have a power rack, so no barbell squats. Belt squats are actually harder than barbell squats because it's impossible to hinge during the movement. It really focuses on the quads and doesn't allow the strong spinal erectors to assist. Now, I can't specify an exact ratio since it depends on how deep your belt squatting is, in addition to your stance, but you'll probably use 20 to 30% less weight than your barbell squat. I would say that 225 for sets of 5 to 10 is a phenomenal goal, and more than enough to develop impressive quads. For elite gains, aiming for 275 to 315 is endgame, provided you're going deep enough. So you'll need some high plyometric boxes, let's say 12 to 15 inches. So I can easily sum up the standard like this. Whatever you consider impressive on your barbell squat for reps, just subtract a plate on each side. And that's your benchmark for belt squats. So in my experience, I did 4 or 5 for 9 reps on the barbell squat. Therefore, 3 plates on belt squats should be all that I need to have 27-inch legs and a 500-pound squat, provided that my posterior chain strength is maintained. And if I'm belt squatting the mid 200s, that equates to 26-inch legs. Low 200s or a bit less would be 25-inch legs. All these I'm okay with, but again, there's no real standardization. It's all anecdotes scaled to the individual. Should I lower the volume on direct tricep work during my push workouts when I do reverse grip bench as opposed to overhand bench? I feel my triceps a lot with the reverse grip. Well, it's normal to feel your triceps more during reverse grip bench because it forces the elbows to stay tucked. In fact, I believe it targets the triceps more than the upper chest, and is just as effective as a low incline close grip bench for triceps development. So theoretically, could you get away with less volume on isolation work? Yes, but not by a significant amount. Personally, I would still perform the same number of exercises, but maybe just reduce the sets by 1 if your triceps are truly exhausted. For example, if you did a classic 3x10 on the reverse grip bench, perhaps followed up with 2 sets of pushdowns and 2 sets of extensions. Or if you're already doing a low volume approach, like 2 sets of reverse grip bench, then do 1 set of pushdowns and 1 set of extensions. Alternatively, you could do 2 sets on a pushdown, which offers the best squeeze and is less taxing, and then 1 set for the extension. But all this to say, I strongly advise against half-assing or skipping isolation work. Don't fall for minimalism, even with the best compound movements. How would you recommend programming super wide pull-ups? Would you put them before or after other variations given their leverage and resistance profiles? Because all super wide grip pull-ups are challenging, and pull-ups in general are arguably the best back builder, I recommend starting your workout with these. Weighted, of course. Somewhere in the 5 to 10 rep range. Because if you try to do them later in the session, you might find that even body weight is too difficult. That said, there's still a happy medium in performing super wides as a secondary back motion. This way, you're nicely warmed up, reducing the risk of armpit overuse, and you won't need additional weights. So in a way, that could offer its own benefits, just that it's not as good for strength development. Now, what I've been doing recently are weighted chin-ups as my first pull-up, followed by a back offset of super wides behind the neck. These are really humbling, such that even 12 to 15 full range of motion reps without weights, and that's a high stimulus. With behind the neck, you can't lean back, so it's a true vertical pull and more lat biased. Another good variation is the neutral super wide pull-up, which is similar to the pronated version in terms of muscular activation, but easier on recovery and allows you to train for longer before needing to rotate. You can use D-handles, rings, or Swissies, which is also great transitional grip for building tissue capacity. Lastly, there is the chest to bar super wide, and my trick is to use reverse bands, making it a feasible option for lat squeezing at the top, and it could be used as a finisher. So you should be all set with those. Should I do behind the neck presses? Been seeing you doing them in your videos. Is it better for the side delts? Well, one of my biggest regrets was dropping behind the neck presses in late 2016. I used to do them all the time. They were even in my original paid programs. But then, influenced by Athlete X, I got scared about injuries and felt that promoting them was irresponsible. However, it turns out that shoulder impingement hypothesis was incorrect, and that managing tissue capacity with load management is actually what matters. So over the last 2.5 months or so, I've been doing behind the neck presses every week and haven't had any negative pains. And I feel my shoulder's working more than any other variation thus far. And the benefit is that it's a pure vertical press, up and down in a straight line, which provides that Smith machine effect. It's very stable, and you don't need to coordinate around the body with the barbell. Plus, there's zero chest involvement or lean back assistance. Not to mention it biases the side delts, giving me yet another reason to skip lateral raises. So I think behind the neck pressing is the best press for building 3D delts. And funny enough, old school lifters all swore by the same thing, including EMG data, which although severely flawed, confirms this. So yes, do them standing, do them seated. Feel free to bring it down to your traps, dead stop, touch and go, 90-degree arm angle, whatever feels good for your structure. I like going slightly wider, using the same grip width as my bench press, and going all the way down to maximize the way to stretch plus standardized form. I'm doing them both at the gym and at home. I love it and feel this is bulletproof for my shoulder joints rather than causing injuries. They also look badass and makes a strong statement to all the soft lifters who shy away from hardcore training. Do you still use your west side scout reverse hyper consistently? Seeing as I'm not lifting heavy on barbell squats or deadlifts these days, I haven't had much need to use my reverse hyper since weekly axial loading is minimized. Back when I was maxing out every week and squatting the 400s for reps on a regular basis, absolutely. The more spinal traction immediately afterward, the better. But now, I honestly don't go above 3 plates on squats because I focus on slowing down the tempo, adding pauses, and using harder variations like high bar, front squat, reverse SSB, etc. I don't give a fuck about the weight. And even with good mornings, while I can do over 3 plates for 10, I choose to stay in the 135 to 225 zone with the ATG version. Then, I always finish with a belt squat, which is again in a similar weight range. As a result, my spine is taking much less of a beating, and overuse issues don't creep up anymore. Therefore, the reverse hyper isn't prioritized in my program. Now, it doesn't mean it's not a legendary piece of equipment. I bought it for a reason. Guys need to stop assuming that just because I'm not doing exercise right now, that's worthless. I stand by every video I ever made on reverse hypers, and most of you should do them if you have access, and you're going heavy as fuck on squats and deads, so check out my recent short for all the best points summed up. And if you have any questions, let me know. But at this point, there's not much else for me to say about the exercise, and the demand on this topic is so low that I'd rather not cover it moving forward. Alright, last question. Alex, will you ever try and learn the planche? You know what? After achieving a shitty straddle planche with zero training for it, I become really curious about what would happen if I specialized in skill training. And since I'm cutting again, already lost over 15 pounds by the way, now's the perfect opportunity to explore a new world of calisthenics, which I completely ignored before. Like I never cared about skill work and just wanted to be bigger and stronger in dynamic bodyweight movements plus weighted calisthenics. But now that I've hit most of my goals, why not try to master the planche and in general get more conditioned? I need to get on the level of Iron Wolf and Fitness FAQs. At the same time, I've realized that I really am an upper body bro and believe in old school aesthetics. What I mean is, I despise the X-taper physique, and anyone who's bottom heavy looks like a Jack Teletubby. And on a shorter man, it makes you look even stubbier. Like even an average height man who's bottom heavy will look shorter. And at my height of 5'5", you don't want that. So I am convinced that the online fitness world has been manipulated into believing that they want tree trunk legs. Or maybe these guys just struggle with upper body gain so much and legs are generally responsive and get much stronger that many lifters end up justifying their lack of upper body progress by focusing on squat and deadlift numbers. And this is what natural hypertrophy calls the power copers. I think that's a real thing. In my sincere opinion, most lifters respect upper body strength and aesthetics more than lower body. Even my analytics over the years confirm this, and powerlifters with spider physiques don't tend to do well on social media. despite their crazy 1 maxes, so that's very telling. So not to sound lazy, because yes, I will continue training legs with self-limiting variations, but maintaining or even downsizing my legs a couple of inches is something that I'm totally cool with. I've already paid my dues. And if I can maintain between 23 to 25 inch legs at my height, let's say while being single digit body fat, then I'm a happy man. Heck, I could even focus on Nordic curls, and with the smaller legs, I'd be better suited for various forms of calisthenics and the lifts that matter to me. So yeah, it's something that I've been thinking about. And I'll probably pull the trigger as I lose more weight. There will be a respectable trade-off, and it's essential to pursue goals that excite you. When you feel the fire, you gotta roast your own marshmallows, even if you're the only one at the campfire. So with that said, we're done this Q&A. Happy holidays to everyone, and I look forward to answering more of your questions in the new year.